Okay, I'd just like to hand over now to Simon Dennehy, who will be addressing notions about ergonomics and ergo-washing. Thank you.
Hi everybody, it's a really fantastic crowd. It's really great to have such a fantastic lineup of speakers and to be part of that. I guess I've been working in this sector for about 7 years now, since I started a 2-year research master's in NCAD under the supervision of Garrod. Garrod has been working for maybe 10 years before that on very specific ergonomic orchestral musicians' chairs, and has done a huge amount of research on that and really set against the college up to look at design for the user in a really interesting way. I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end, about the fruits of our labour, but I guess this is the first time I've given a talk like this where I'm trying to move away from talking about school furniture and more about how we as a design company who are research and design led are focusing on what it is to have our core DNA established, and how we proceed and how we continue to design for the user. So here we're just talking about, at the very end, this is indicative of our first delve into research for the user. It was a knowledge acquisition phase, and it really builds our knowledge of what it is to be working in Perch. So we're talking about developing a spine of knowledge. So as we move away from primary education, we move towards higher education. Primary is where I would have studied for my 2-year research master's and then subsequently for a PhD. That's ongoing. Perch is looking at that type of design. While we're known as chair designers, we're certainly not just that. But as a result of some of the research we're doing and some of the partners we're working with, every now and then we do what we call a product drop. So it's an indication of some of the work that has led us to this point in time, and hopefully we can start creating an awareness for the type of design that we're working on. So hopefully as we move into different sectors, we carry a lot of the knowledge that we've built up with us, so we can diversify and go further again. And it really builds, I guess, on what we call our core DNA. So for this talk, I'm going to be talking about an introduction of a new term, which I feel is quite important and quite timely. The reason behind that term, I'll be doing a little bit of complaining and nagging. There's a reason for that I'll talk about. I'm going to give a suggestion of what we are doing wrong and how we're being misguided and misleaded. And I'm going to also make a contribution that I feel I guess everybody in this lineup of speakers has made excellent contributions to this. So I hope I speak for these speakers a little bit, but it's certainly a discussion point that I'd like to move forward. So it's not finished by any means, but it's something that I think I call it our Rosetta Stone. It's what we live into when we design, especially when we design for task chairs. So while we're trying to get away from the notion of us being chair designers, today I'm going to talk specifically about the task chair. And then at the end I'm going to just give a little introduction to Ray, which is a result of 7 years' work, and it's been produced by a very exciting Danish company called Labufa, and there's some people sitting out here in the audience as well. So the term we're trying to coin is ergo-washing, and ergo-washing it's a form of false advertising which promotes the perception that an organization's products are designed to be beneficial to the postural health of the end user. Rather than being research-led with the aim of minimizing long-term effects of poor design, ergo-washing sends a false message which can lead to serious long-term diseases for many people. Most importantly, this form of trust manipulation underpins the direction of future product development. And just to give a few quick examples of that, we travel quite a bit, and we talk to a lot of people at trade fairs who've brought out new, very important products that they're calling new ergonomic chairs. We often talk to salesmen who tell us about how they've interacted with a big name designer, and when you ask them about what's so special about this chair, that there's hundreds of thousands of euros or dollars spent, this is an actual quote that we got from a salesman at Turkman. It was, to be perfectly honest, there's nothing sensational about it. It's just a good ergonomic chair. And that's not enough anymore, because there's some serious problems with the false perception of what it is to have an ergonomic chair. There are ergonomic aspects to the chair, but the idea is that when you call it ergonomic, it's contributing to the better health of the person. And when it's not, that person is completely left blinded, I think. And this is one of the reasons why. If you were to search in Google just ergonomic chair, every chair is ergonomic. It's almost impossible not to buy an ergonomic chair, you know. And I think it's just becoming this wasteful term that people tack on at the end quite a lot. And I think it's quite daunting then to try and do something revolutionary, because you're building on all this knowledge that you think you understand what an ergonomic chair is. The same thing goes for school furniture. We've done a lot of research into this. There's a few cases of excellent furniture out there, but I think there's a very fine balance between what constitutes posturally ergonomic or posturally good chairs and aesthetically good chairs. And I think it's time that we started to meet in the middle. I think that's really important to guide the future development of furniture. So some of the problems with sedentary life, I guess, there's a huge list of problems associated with like deep vein thrombosis, cardiovascular disease, mortality, and the list goes on and on and on. It's linked to colon cancer, it's linked to heart disease, neck pain, depression. So as a result of that, it seems to be that the static life that we're leading at the moment, sitting at desks for hours on end, there's very little that can be done about that until we start moving at our desk. It's not necessarily all about 30 minutes in the gym after work. It's more about continuous low threshold movement throughout the course of the day. And when furniture gets in the way of that, and furniture prevents that, I think that's a very serious cause of concern. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, and this is our own take on that. And there's loads of examples, but I guess what resonated most with us when we were developing the furniture, and we're retrospectively looking back on it now, is there are maybe 4 main issues that we're concerned with. The first being lumbar support. Lumbar support is fantastic if it's used correctly, but when it becomes the starting point of a chair design, I think it can be very, very bad. If you consider the pelvis first, that's far more beneficial, because the pelvis really guides the lower part of the lumbar. So there's no problem if the lumbar is there, but if the pelvis reacts negatively as a result of the seat pan, then it's counterintuitive. You're pressing against that back that wants to be flattened because of the pelvis. So I think a lot of people, when they see a very nice office chair, they go, oh, that's exactly what I want, a good backrest. And it's really not, I think. There's a whole culture at the moment. There's a lot of big companies focusing on reclining being the new way to think about task furniture. And most of the chairs in this room here are reclined, which is fine for short term. There's no problem with reclining. It does help to take the weight off the spine. But when it's the way that we're positioned for task working, I think that's a big problem, because what it does is it makes us static. And when we're static, our muscles, our core muscles, go into dystrophy. As well as that, it causes a huge amount of technical over-engineering, I would call it, to bring the monitors, the keyboard, and everything up in front of you. But I guess physiologically, I think that lack of exercise as a result of completely reclining at the desk is a cause for concern. Again, I don't have a problem with reclining if it's done in the right context, and certainly for relaxing, it's number 1 on my list, but not for task work, I think, and specifically not for school furniture. And there have been instances where that's been suggested. Again, movement. We're all about movement. The type of chairs we do focus on the right type of movement. However, just using that term to sell furniture, I think, can cause a lot of problems. And I've seen some chairs that have been designed where the pivot points are very questionable on the chair, and you can actually see that the users are battling with it. But that chair is being sold on the basis of it being a moving chair. So I think in the context of what we're trying to achieve, we're trying to get an awareness for where that movement should come from, okay? Without necessarily the need for a mechanistic approach to chair design. And I guess the final thing on that list would be insular design. It's very difficult to design the perfect school chair. You have to be aware of the environment, you have to be aware of the social structure, you have to be aware of pedagogy, you have to be aware of the architectural space, the lighting, the sounds, the type of students you're dealing with, what their task is, what is the goal of education as well. I mean, education is moving on a timeline, and we're designing for something that will be outdated very quickly. So I don't think it's possible to design effective school chairs or task chairs in an isolated point of view. So I guess as part of an exercise since Christmas, we've really looked at what our core values are. We're trying to set it down in stone and create our future focus for what it is to be working in Perch and where we go. And I guess it's important for us to put it out there to people and put it out there to industry to see if we're going in the right direction. We've been talking to quite a few people. We've been talking to Event Fire for quite a while and other influencers. And at the moment, we stand pretty confident on our approach that we have a good direction. So I'm going to call out a few of those key points that we think are a new way to start. Well, not a new way, actually. It's just a culmination of lots of, specifically with Galen's approach in the chair. I think she's been a great influencer, and also AC Mandal. That approach has been very influential for us. See, the approach we're taking is a pelvic first approach. So rather than trying to engineer a backrest or trying to engineer a footrest, we're trying to engineer a chair that allows the user to align their pelvis in the correct way first. And after that, the spine is allowed to neutrally load, the legs are allowed to react to the pelvis, so everything is in a kind of a neutral balance. Number one on the list would be pelvic rotation, the appropriateness of it, and as you move backwards towards a recline, or if you move forward, that changes as well, but it's always from our point of view coming from the pelvis. Hip abduction, where the separation of the legs happens. I'm not necessarily saying that everybody always has to have their legs separated, but certainly when the chair prevents that, I think that's a very bad thing, because the closer the legs get, the pelvis tends to react to that. And then the lower lumbar reacts to that as well. So you have a really bad situation that can be prevented by just sloping the chair the other way. Third thing is neck and back. I'm not saying that all the time we need neck and back support, but certainly when it's important, only as a reaction to pelvic rotation, I think that's when it comes in. Okay. One of the main learning features that we found when we were testing school furniture was that the relative positioning of the work, specific to students and also to adults, is hugely important, which just, I guess, backs up the point that it can't be insular. We know that for large schools, children who have an adjustable chair, if their desk is wrong, they'll drop their chair just to get close to the work, and it compounds the problem. So you can't do these things in isolation, and especially when you're talking about task work, that positioning of the work is hugely important, and it should be considered when we're designing the chairs as well. Consideration for the environment, again, I think I covered some of that, but I mean, we've seen some very interesting scenarios when we were testing our school furniture in schools where they'll close down the blinds to stop the sunlight coming in because it competes with the projector. So, and it does have an effect on the psychology of the student, it does have an effect on how you design for that scenario. So I think you have to be aware of all of this. Variety is hugely important. I guess one of the key takeaways from researching lots of different types of chairs is that when a chair forces you into a specific position, like a saddle or a kneel chair, you're stuck in that position for quite a long time. You may be able to move a little bit, but when that chair stops variety of sitting, I think it's a bad thing. So if you can encourage variety and movement, I think that's where we're coming from. A reduction in complexity. We see so much money going into chair design where there's a big backrest, and the reason is because you're pivoting from right underneath the chair, and you have a £300 American or a £300 Irishman, and they want to recline. They want to recline on their chair. It was one of the questions that got asked to us when we designed our first school chair. How is a £300 student going to cope in this chair? And I mean, it's an impossible thing to ask. You know, especially if you're depending on a backrest to support all that weight, rather than coming from pelvis first, it's a lot easier to cope with. So from our point of view, we always try to get the absolute reduction in complexity so that the user does the work, because the user is a very complex mechanism. So it doesn't need to be pounded and pounded from all different angles to try and align them correctly. We're very much about core-centric, active, dynamic sitting. For any sport, even for playing darts, the core muscles are so important. And I think as we recline into our offices and as we recline and relax, you feel that core and back muscles are really suffering. There's big deposits of fat taking those places. I think that's a real problem. And the final thing on my list would be aesthetics. I think aesthetics where form follows function, but the consumer follows form. So you often see niche products on the market, and they do everything that you look for in a task chair or on a piece of design, but they just don't sell well. They sell to niche audience, but they'll never become market leaders because of the aesthetic. And I do think it's possible to design for both. I do think it's quite an exciting challenge. And I think hopefully this is a starting point for a design brief for new task chairs. So just finishing up, this is the fruits of I guess it's our first product drop. We were very lucky to have a fantastic company called La Bufa in Denmark, and we worked very closely with an amazing design house, Hans Teig Ranker, and his team to collaborate based on our research, taking that forward and getting an aesthetic, I guess, for the Scandinavian market, but it's really taken off around the world. We're getting interest all over. So it's a height adjustable, flexible school chair. So the idea is that the front wings of the chair give way to the student. So as you sit higher in the chair, it deforms into a saddle type seat, but you can sit down low and you can sit at right angles as well. And it really is a playful seat. You have a rigid pommel in the front, so your pelvis is allowed to rotate forward. There's some samples of it here. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I'd encourage you to have a sit in it, and I'd love to get your feedback on that. The desk also rotates forward. So props the book, but they're all adjustable. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much.